Well, hello everybody, and welcome to our latest CODA webinar. Absolutely delighted to bring this one. This has been a piece of work that we've been executing for a while now, and we had in our mind to execute for way longer than that, and that is to talk about our new Outlook platform, which we launched 2 weeks ago today. Joining us for the session, who I'll introduce properly in a minute. We've got Jake Stride and Cormac Dawson, who have been the people who have actually done the bulk of the work on all of this lot. But I guess just before I sort of hand over to them, why we've done it, I think is an important thing to consider. When I think back to where we began with CODA 2019-2020, the first piece of work that we undertook was to develop what was referred to as the liability study. So this was essentially a benchmarking exercise where we looked to see what was installed in the offshore waters off Australia, and then overlaid with that what a timeline would look like, and did some cost estimations and volumes of materials and so forth. From pretty much the day that work was launched, we've been regularly asked for how do we see what's underneath that data? How do we see what's sitting under the hood? How do we get to see down to a much more granular level so we can actually use that data for real business planning and investment decision making? And it took us a while to find the right way to do it, quite honestly. And it was a conversation with Jake, probably coming up on a year ago now, I guess, where we started on this journey to get to this point. But what that's culminated in is now this platform. As I say, we went live with it last week. What's out there now, I would refer to as the Rev Zero. We are looking already at things to enhance with it. So once you've had the proper walkthrough here from Cormac and Jake, and you've had a bit of a go at it yourselves, if you have bright ideas about, oh, could we do this, could we do that, please do come to us with ideas, because we want this to be a live and valuable and increasingly valuable tool for the whole of industry to be able to leverage to help to plan and to do as good a job as you all possibly can around the decommissioning works that we've got ahead of us. So with that as a bit of background, I'll set the context in terms of the two gentlemen that you're going to be hearing from. So Jake Stride is the CEO for RAD, and RAD were the Perth-based AI specialist organization who we worked with to do all of the heavy lifting in terms of just capturing all of the data for this. And then the other voice that you'll hear from after Jake is Cormac Dawson, and Cormac's an analyst that works with us here at CODA, and Cormac was the one who built the front end for it and worked very, very closely with Jake around making sure all the data was mapped together properly and so forth. So anyway, before I get myself completely tripped up and start talking about things that are way beyond my experience and knowledge, I'll hand over to Jake really to tell us now about the how in terms of the work that you've done and the work your platform did to get us to this point. So over to you, please, Jake.
I'm the CEO of RAD AI. We've got a AI platform which is actually specifically focused on the decommissioning space, and we've spent a lot of time working through that and making sure that it understands the unique domain, the context, and what people want in that space. And one of the biggest challenges is, how do you take a lot of this unstructured, large amounts of documentation and knowledge and build structured data sets, that sort of data where you really know what's in there, so that you can then plan and make forward-looking decisions. You can start to run much better scenarios. And that's what we've really taken the time to build. And we've got a lot of features and functionality in there, but I just wanted to focus in today on three key areas that we've worked with specifically with CODA through this, and that I think would be relevant to anybody that's looking to do this type of work in the future. And our platform that we've got can work across both operators, industry bodies, and also service partners as well, based on the type of work that they need, whether it's due diligence, the sorts of things we've looked at in the Outlook here, or planning and lessons learned and feedback for P&A campaigns, for example. So three key challenges that I wanted to talk about Today, I'll go through those quickly. I'll then give you a little bit of background about what our system actually looks like, how Cormac and the team from CODA actually use it, and then we'll hand over to Cormac so he can talk to how the CODA Outlook platform works from that side of things. So hallucinations. I don't know whether people on the webinar today have heard about this before, but one of the big challenges with artificial intelligence is that it can hallucinate. So what does this mean? It's effectively where artificial intelligence can create an answer that sounds so realistic and compelling that without any fact checking on it, you would assume that it is right. I could go and ask a tool like ChatGPT to write my LinkedIn profile for me, and it would come back. And if you didn't know my work history or my career, it would sound reasonably compelling and sensible for someone of my kind of age and work history. But it's completely made up, and that's hallucinations. Now, as everyone can understand, when you're trying to make informed decisions to run your business in a different way, to decommission assets, if you can't get that fixed, then you can't get anywhere. And that's one of the things that we've spent a lot of time at RAD working on, so that our platform underneath works through, really understands exactly where that data is coming from, and also understands terms, equipment, data hierarchies and models that we have in the oil and gas and decommissioning space, so that we reduce the likelihood of those hallucinations. And I'll touch back on that in a second. So that's problem one, hallucinations, the AI system giving you compelling results that are factually incorrect. The second challenge that we deal with is just the size of data that is involved in this space. So when we talk to size, we can talk to an environmental plan. Now, I think if Francis or Cormac had to read every single page of all of the environmental plans for every piece of work across Australia, they'd probably still be reading those now rather than actually building value with the tool. So one of the things that our platform also does is takes those documents, breaks them down into small manageable chunks that the AI can actually understand. One of the challenges with existing tools is that with these large documents, they tend to just choke and are not able to process them. So another challenge that we have taken and solved is that ability to take these very large documents, break them down, be able to extract the data from things like tables and diagrams, and make that into meaningful data sets that can be used. And that's one of the challenges that we worked through with Cormac and the team early on. Was a lot of data is in tables or images that isn't particularly easy to extract, and that was one of the areas that we focused on early on with them when looking for some of the data around pipelines and umbilicals, was how can we pull that data out and understand it. So that challenge, again, is one that we've spent a lot of time working on and solved in an elegant manner. So taking large documents, splitting them down so that you can understand them, but then also, as importantly, how do you just take these huge data sets? AI is very good at running through those and processing them very quickly in comparison to a human reading a document and running through those. So we've solved the problem of how do you stop a computer hallucinating. We've solved the problem of managing these large data sets and processing them meaningfully. The third problem then is, well, great, but how do you build these data sets and understand where that data has actually come from? And that's what we call the provenance, or the technical integrity. So once you've got this data in the system, how do you understand where that has come from? If the AI is telling you, or our platform is telling you, that a pipeline is 36.2 kilometers long, how do you know that's not a hallucination? And that was the final challenge that we'd solved in our problem, was having that ability to provide that provenance and feedback so that when you're looking at the data, you can see exactly from which data source it's come from, whether it's come from an environmental plan, whether it's come from another data source, whether it's something that a colleague has updated manually in the system as well. And keeping that provenance and history is key to then being able to have comfort and trust in the data set that's there.
Yeah.
So at a high level, AI solves those. What we've had to do is really refine them for the domain and the size of information that needs to be processed in a scenario like the one that CODA have been working through. Now, we like to look at that as playing Guitar Hero. So hopefully there's a few people on the webinar today who've played Guitar Hero at some point. AI, these types of expert systems are incredibly complex. We've got a great team at Rad AI that understand this and are able to make it simple. So our system really takes those complex tasks, distills that expertise, and embed it so that at the end of the day, you can be the heroes of decommissioning and focus on how do you build value on top of data that you may not have had access to. I'll pause there. I'm just going to show a few areas of the system. Now this is the side that Cormac and the CODA team will have been using, just how that comes together actually in the Rad AI platform. So this is an example of a facility. You can see over on the right-hand side here, this is actually where the AI has come up with a number of answers from different documents and shows you exactly where in the source documents that has come from. And you can actually see a couple of examples through that space. So here, for example, it's trying to find the year of installation for the facility. You can see that the AI and our system has picked up a number of values that are all the same. So weighting and voting, you could be confident that answer is correct, and that makes it into your data source. So when you click through to it, you can also see exactly where that's come from. So when I was talking to provenance earlier, the citations, which documents those have come from, you have that ability to see it in the system as well. And then I just showed another example here as well. So quite often there's a breadth of answers to questions. So in this case, wanting to know the depth of the facility, we're able through the data sources that we have to actually find greater detail on that. So having that you may want to use elsewhere in the system, understanding that there are different water depths at different parts of the facility, for example, is really key. Just another quick example. So this is one of the dashboards that we have in the system, and this really helps to pinpoint the holes and the accuracy that you need to fix in the data set. So our system will automatically correct data issues for you where it can, but this is a good example of focusing time on the right areas. So here, for example, our system is telling you which areas of your data need the attention so that you can go and fill out the missing gaps effectively where the AI has not necessarily been able to find the data that you might be looking for around that in the system. One last thing before I hand over to Cormac. Version history, that's another key part for us. So providing that audit trail within the system, so as you build your data up over time, you bring more and more data sources into the system. Having that audit trail, that version history is really important to ensure that the data integrity isn't lost and that you can see how you've built and refined your data sets over time. And that then becomes particularly important for other areas that we work in around planning, around simulations and scenarios, having that ability to understand how and where that data has come from really is key within the system as well. Those are the high-level areas that I wanted to cover off today. I'm going to hand over to Cormac now, but please, as you've been through that, if you think of any questions, please feel free to add them into the webinar, and we'll work through those and look forward to answering those at the end. So thank you for the time today and the opportunity. And Cormac, I'll hand over to you.
Great, thank you. Thanks, Jake. Yeah, the RAD AI platform has been really helpful, particularly with drawing data from so many sources and managing that version control, which can get out of hand in something like a Excel spreadsheet. So as Francis mentioned, I'm Cormac from CODA. I managed the Forward Outlook project. So that included working on the database development with Jake and his team, and then building the Power BI interface that we'll go through this afternoon. So in my presentation, I'll focus on the final product that is the Forward Outlook, or version 0, as Francis noted. I'll demonstrate some features and touch on some insights, and I'll briefly cover some data sources and key user notes before I jump into that. So a couple of quick slides from me. So another provenance slide, but slightly different to Jake's. So this is really touching on what we use to build the Forward Outlook. So our objective was to map offshore assets and wells in Australian Commonwealth and territorial waters as of 30 June 2024. And really, we focused on sourcing credible, publicly accessible data. Published title holder materials really formed the backbone of the database, and that was largely drawing environment plans published by title holders but presented on the regulator's website. We also used a range of other title holder documents, including consultation briefings, investor presentations, announcements, and other publications. We also consulted a range of government databases in building the Forward Outlook. So at a federal level, that included the NOPIMS Wells database, NOPTA's NEATS platform, which is really good pipeline information. At a state level, in Western Australia, the WAPIMS Wells database, the EARS system, which covers a lot of territorial assets and territorial waters, GeoVic for Victoria, Strike for Northern Territory, and in Timor-Leste, the LAFATE database, which covers the Joint Petroleum Development Area. So a range of sources pulled into that RAD AI platform. So in terms of what's included in the Forward Outlook, at a high level, we've captured over 100 attributes across the categories presented on screen for just shy of 100 oil and gas fields. We've essentially rebuilt the database that Francis mentioned that was developed for CODA's 2020 baseline decommissioning liability assessment study, but we've used only publicly available information, and we've significantly expanded it. We've also integrated a significant amount of detailed decommissioning timing estimates. It's also worth noting what's out of scope in the Forward Outlook. Firstly, the tool is forward-looking, as the name suggests. It displays assets and estimated decommissioning timing from 2024 onwards. So it doesn't include assets and wells that have already been decommissioned. Likewise, it doesn't include future installations that are not yet fully commissioned. They'll appear in the data set as and when they come online. And it doesn't detail proposed end states. So a few notes before we jump into a demo. The Forward Outlook, as Francis said, it captures a current snapshot of the decommissioning industry, which is subject to constant change. And that's why we shifted from the static study document to an interactive database that evolves over time, and it's really a living database. And we're implementing periodic updates and feedback mechanisms to maintain its currency. So that's we've only launched last week. That's already something that's top of mind and something that we're already working on. So we can maintain a current and actionable data. In terms of timing estimates, decommissioning timing information contained in the Forward Outlook reflects estimates based on currently available data. It doesn't reflect title holder commitments. So where we've estimated cessation of production, COP dates are based on published title holder documents, and we report the earliest year in a range when exact dates are uncertain. Likewise, with estimated decommissioning dates, we've derived these from title holder EPs. We've incorporated regulator expectations for work to be completed within 1, 3, and 5 years post-COP where gaps exist. And we use assumptions like this where we've got a project where field life might be end of field lives in 20 years time, and we don't have specific COP dates. And we tried to develop a complete and comprehensive database. So assumptions, were integrated in some places. In terms of decommissioning phases, the focus is on execution in the forward outlook rather than planning phases. And all timings represent broad activity windows rather than precise task durations. So in terms of outputs, the Forward Outlook's a multi-page interactive report. It's accessible through CODA's partner portal on the CODA website. We've got two versions. So we've got a publicly available summary version, which you can see on screen. It provides a high-level snapshot of the decommissioning landscape with some basic filtering functionality by state and decade. Then we've got the detailed Forward Outlook, which I'll take you through now, which is a comprehensive report, and it provides a more detailed asset breakdown and a greater breakdown of decommissioning timing estimates and more filtering options. So we'll jump into that now. Bear with me. So hopefully you can all see that. So what we'll do is I'll demo the tool and we'll step through as much of it as we can, mindful of time, and then I can address questions at the end. So firstly, maybe if we start over here, we've got our navigator panel on the left. You can hover over icons to see the various section names. We've got three general pages at the top. They cover high-level information with ability to drill down. So we've got a summary snapshot. You can get a map view, look at the decommissioning timelines. And then in the bottom left, we've got 5 sections that are focused on asset-specific categories: fixed facilities, floating facilities, subsea infrastructure, lines, and wells. And you could go to any of these sections by clicking on the icon. Within each page, we've got a filter menu that's tucked away here. Click on the filter icon, click on the arrow to close that. Filter sets are tailored to each individual page. And we have some common filters that flow through the report. For instance, operator, field, your state and basin details will filter to WA in this instance, and then earliest year of decommissioning, and then you can clear your filter here. So you can see if I apply a filter to the data set, as you'd expect, this is filtered to Western Australia. That flows right through the Forward Outlook until you remove that filter, which I'll do just now for the purposes of our chat. You can also manually slice the data by clicking on visuals. If I click here on this subsea wells variable, it will filter the rest of the data on the page around that particular variable. Likewise, we can select a certain geography on the map and highlight that, and or refine the data set based on that selection. So quite handy if you want to hone in on a particular geography. You can do that here. In terms of the state of play, you can see we've mapped 97 fields across Australia. We've got 740 wells mapped. That's down from 1,008 wells in 2020 for that original baseline assessment. So a significant amount of P&A work has been completed since 2020. Our estimations are that forecast for the remainder through to 2030, approximately another 285 wells are forecast to be plugged and abandoned. And then between 2030 and 2040, another 320 odd wells are forecast to be decommissioned. So a significant workload, particularly up to 2040. So that represents around 82% of the current world stock, based on what's currently out there, noting that there are some new projects on the horizon. Australia-wide, we've got 54 fixed facilities, predominantly jackets, 47 jackets, substructures, 3 concrete and 4 steel GBS structures. And collectively, that represents more than 225,000 tonnes in topsides and 446,000 tonnes of substructures. We've mapped 52 subsea facilities across the fields in the study, and collectively that's over 5,100 kilometers of pipelines, 1,900 kilometers of infill flow lines, over 1,600 kilometers of static umbilicals. And then we've got our flexible risers and dynamic umbilicals on top of that. And we've captured 580 subsea structures. So these represent things like manifolds, plems, etc. to be lifted. So a significant workload. If you look at this chart, we can see a high-level view of the quantity of assets to be removed by year, and that's year of commencement. We can toggle that to get a basin level view as well. So you can see significant amount of assets in the Northern Carnarvon Basin, Gippsland Basin, Bonaparte and Browse. Some of these charts can be a bit small, so you can click on focus mode and increase the size there and get a bit more detail. And then likewise with our charts, handy for trend analysis, but a lot of data to display all the values, so you can right click on those as well and get the detail in tables. So handy if you want to see the numbers that are underpinning these trends. I'll move on to map page. I won't dwell on this one. It contains largely similar information to the dashboard with a bigger map. We've got the data segmented into 5-year blocks based on estimated decommissioning timeframes. So it's a handy way of filtering to the data in these 5-year blocks. So I've just clicked on 2025 to 2029, and you can see the approximate workload during that period, noting that some fields will span multiple periods. But it's just a handy way of eyeballing assets, gauging proximity, and getting a high-level understanding of timing. I'll move on to the decommissioning timeline. So here we can get a better understanding of when work is being done, where, and how much. We can view timelines from a field perspective, which you can see here. And then we can also focus in on particular phases. So for example, I could filter this to platform wells and understand across Australia, the estimated timelines for platform well decommissioning. I could then select a given area on the map and understand how, for a given geography, what's going on in my particular area. So for operators, for example, understanding who's doing what, within the proximity of their fields and their projects, or for the service sector, understanding, in my area of interest, what's the upcoming workload looking like, and being able to plan accordingly. If I shift back to the field level view, here you can get a high level view of time frames, estimated decommissioning time frames at a field level. And then we can expand these out to understand, okay, noting it doesn't include work that's already been done, what does the upcoming breakdown of work look like? And we've tried to link asset quantities as well, so you can get an appreciation of timeline, but also of what a particular phase represents. So I'll be really interested to get feedback as our partners start to use the tool, and we can further refine it. The map is obviously handy at the top for just being able to filter by geography, and then we've got a running subtotal. So depending on what you select, it's just handy if you're looking at multiple fields or a particular area. So I won't dwell on the asset-specific modules just because of time. I'll go through the fixed facilities section and touch on the other ones briefly. The 5 modules share the same layout. So here we are in fixed facilities. We've got an overview page where you can get a snapshot of forecast decommissioning timeframes and quantity of materials for decommissioning. So we might just, for the purposes of this, hone in on Western Australia. I'm in Western Australia, so focusing on that. We can see on this particular map we've got a count of topsides for removal or decommissioning by year. So a little peak, around 2027. The light purple bar or column represents topside mass, with the darker blue representing substructure mass. So we've got a kind of peak of some pretty big topsides to be decommissioned in the mid-2030s, and it's a couple of concrete gravity-based structures. Here we can also filter to get a basin level view of this information. So we're filtered into WA here, so we've got the 2 basins rather than the full complement. If we shift on, you can also see a plot of fixed facilities on the map. Bubble sizes represent mass of the facilities. So obviously the larger ones are the bigger bubbles. We've got them color-coded by substructure, so you can just kind of filter in on the data that way. And again, it's just a visual representation of the data set, which you can cut into based on your particular needs. So I'll touch on our detail page. So we've got one of these detail tables for each of the 5 core asset categories that we've mapped. Here you can get, so you've obviously got, so what we've done is we've mapped assets within all fields. So we've gone down to the asset level. So some fields will have multiple top sides, for example, and they'll all be mapped here. You can view them at the field level, or you can drill down into the detail. So here we've got general details on the left. We've got location information. You can see state and basin. We've also segmented the full database in terms of jurisdiction. So we're adding a master filter in our next revision, where you'll be able to kind of segment the full data set based on a Commonwealth or territorial jurisdictions, which will be quite handy. We've got key date information from installation years, spud dates for wells, through to COP estimates and decommissioning timeline estimates, or when they're forecast to commence. We've also collected operational status, and then for each specific asset category, we've got asset specific information. So in this case, we've captured water depth, topside mass, substructure mass, substructure configuration, deck type, be it modular or integrated, legs, risers, installation method. Each of these tables, we've integrated some heat map features where we've got numbers, just so you can understand, or reorder tables, or based on those sizes. A darker color represents a larger number. You can toggle all tables just by clicking on column headers as well. So I'll remove that filter. And we'll just quickly touch on, mindful of the time, quickly touch on other sections. So they follow the same layout. We've captured detailed information for floating facilities. Likewise with subsea infrastructure, lines, and wells. So I'll just highlight on, so we've kind of taken a step further than the original baseline assessment, where lines and wells are reported at the field level. We've gone down into the individual lines, so you can get that roll up and get a field level view of pipelines and flow lines. You can use the filters to segment, to filter to either pipeline or flow line or material type. But you can also delve down into the details. So depending on your use case, lots of partners will probably, be viewing the data at a pretty high level, but everyone's a little bit different in terms of how they're going to use it. So you do have the ability to jump down into the individual line and individual well, which again you can see here. Okay, I think that's about it, just as a quick run through. As Francis mentioned, we want the Forward Outlook to be as useful as possible, and we welcome partner feedback. We're currently implementing a feedback feature on the partner portal page, which will appear imminently, so keep an eye out for that one.
Thank you very much, gentlemen, for that. I'm assuming that all those of you who've got questions have either already been answered, or you're now just sitting thinking that was an awful lot to absorb, and trying to work out what your questions may be. So while you each get your thinking caps on and start putting some into ideally into the chat, but failing which in the Q&A, we are monitoring both. I've got I guess a few questions of my own that I'd like to start off with. Firstly, I'll start with you, Jake. And I've got to say, every time I go on a webinar, it's so interesting to see some of the terms that people use. I did not expect hallucinations and Guitar Hero to come up in this one. So well done for bringing some new topics in on this. Maybe a slightly different question around the platform. What else could it be used for? You've got this wonderful tool that has clearly harvested an enormous amount of data for us here. I know you've got other plans for it. Just if you want to expand on that maybe for a minute or two.
Absolutely. So there's a few key areas that we do work with others on. I think one of the really interesting areas is the time to feedback on lessons learned in decommissioning. So that ability to understand what's happened as you're running a project before you move on to the next one in a matter of hours or days, effectively. So that time frame is very compressed, and that's an area where AI is very good at being able to trawl through everything that's happened and go, okay, here are key lessons learned. What can we focus in on those? Taking that a step further, one of the other areas we're working on is how can partners and operators actually collaborate on that in a meaningful way? So where are there lessons learned across specific ways of doing things, tools, etc., that may or may not work well, that they can share those learnings from that side of things. The other area is due diligence. So for people that are going through and looking at procuring assets, being able to consume and build out the data that they would typically want. You've typically got engineers spending days, weeks, or even longer trawling through that. Being able to get that in hours is another key one, and really now focusing more on the environmental and the traceability side of things is another area too, and how to plan campaigns. So being able to really understand now what you've got, what is and isn't working across different methods, then being able to be a lot more comfortable about how you're going to treat your risk profile in that space with better outcomes.
Very good. Thanks, Jake. We've got questions starting to come in, so I'll switch to those now rather than mine that I had scribbled down here. Cormac, you sort of touched on this one a little bit anyway with your in the closing of your session, but automated process or a process for partners to correct data where they see incorrect data.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, so Francis, that's something that we're setting up at the moment, but ideally we're implementing a mechanism to capture feedback. So, people can flag where they've spotted an error, or they know something's wrong, or something has changed, and then we can go and look at that and verify it ourselves and then push it through the system. Ideally, the kind of end goal is that we build up trust and comfort around the data and how we're using it, and we can get direct input from title holders eventually. That'd be the best way of kind of closing the loop on data and maintaining its accuracy. We've noted as well on in our notes and kind of disclaimers around the tool that the data is really robust and reliable, but there are lags as well with information reaching the public domain, or there can be lags between when documents are published and EPs are submitted and published, and plans obviously change all the time. So that's it's something that's top of mind, something that we're working on.
Very good. So maybe a question for both of you, this next one here. And this was the other question that Simon's put up. It's when ingesting the tabular data from public PDFs and documents, what's the let's say the nominal split between what the AI does and where the human needs to get involved in there? That's probably a bit of both of you, I guess, to give your thoughts on that one.
Yeah, Cormac, I haven't had time to jump on the chat and check that we give the same answer to this question. Look, I think it was definitely one of the areas that we spent some time refining as we went through this, Cormac, wasn't it? Around the first pass of being able to manage and deal with tables, we got a reasonable hit, but actually it wasn't where either our organisations really wanted it to be. And so we did some more training on the model and got better at that. I think the way I'd answer that is a lot of that comes down to how much is available in the document. So being able to pull a table out of a PDF and being able to manage and then put that into other forms is pretty easy. We've kind of got that one working pretty well. But I think it comes back a little bit to what I was showing in terms of dashboards, of saying, well, okay, you might want 15 different data fields for a pipeline, for example, but if you're consistently finding 5 of those as a gap, it's probably because people are not putting that in an environmental plan, for example. And so therefore, what are the other data sources that you can use to start to bring those together? And that's something that we've worked on other areas, is how do you chain prompts or data sources together so you can kind of look in one place. If you don't have a good answer, you're comfortable with move on to the next one. And so before Cormac, I pass over, I think for me, it's got a good hit rate at being able to manage and pull data out of tables, but the quality or the coverage of what's in those varies depending on different types of documents.
Yeah. So just following on from Jake, so the AI does a really good job of pulling from both text and tables. So a lot of the information as well was from just paragraph text. That's the way it's presented in EPs, and then Jake's team did additional work to kind of set up the capability to pull from tables. But in terms of, I guess, the manual intervention piece, it wasn't really manual intervention, but just from a kind of quality perspective, we worked through all the data. We worked through every data point pretty much, multiple times. We're building something from scratch, so we're trying to verify, what the AI has pulled out versus source material. So, we built this from the bottom up, and the idea is that it's all kind of testing and checking, and the model did a great job, but we still want to kind of check everything first time around.
Yeah, thank you. Couple more questions. I might, in the interest of getting quick answers on a couple of these, I might just answer them directly as I get to them as well. How long to build from commencement to completion? We started working with Jake in beginning of November last year, Jake, I think, wasn't it? We kicked this off, and we went live with it 2 weeks ago. That would be start to finish to where we are now. Now, there were peaks and troughs on both sides in all of this. There was a period where we were mapping out how all the data would go together, defining what all the keywords were and such like. There was a period at the back end, the last 4 weeks, for instance, where we spent a lot of time doing data validation so that we had as much faith as we possibly could in the product when we went live with it. But there would have been probably 5 months of real deep work going on in there in terms of harvesting the data, testing it, cleaning it, refining the questions, and so forth. So I think that's that. So November to beginning of July is what, 7-8 months, somewhere in there to get to the launch point. A question I will I'll put to both of you again, but if one of you wants to have a go at this one, and then we'll get a quick answer and move on to the other questions. Who vets the data in the first instance? And I think you touched on this right at the start, both of you, but just to talk again about what the sources of the data are.
Yeah, so from our perspective, they come from data that has been vetted. So things like the environmental plans are things that are being submitted and approved by NOPSEMA, for example. We then provide that in a manner that can then be easily reviewed based on what data needs to be extracted from it, which is really that handover point. Maybe Cormac for you to talk to.
Yeah, I guess it goes through multiple processes. So there's obviously the source. So we're going directly to title holder documents. So they've vetted it themselves, and it's gone to the regulator. It's been approved. Then Jake's team are ingesting that through the RAD Connect platform, and then I'm going through and checking at the end. So there's multiple kind of verifications, or where we've got some conflicts, we'll go off and check other sources as well.
Cool. Right, another one I think I can have a go at here. This was a question around the updates and the timeliness of the data. When it went live 2 weeks ago, it was comprehensive and complete at that point in time. Our current plan is, unless anything significant happens along the timeline, around about once a quarter, we will run an update, and we'll run the platform over any EPs or any other data sets that have changed in that interim, and then we'll re-release it at that point in time. So the data itself isn't live. It's brought in, it's tested, and then it's released. So there'll be periodic updates that will come through on this. At the moment, those changes are happening a little bit quicker as we get the last little bits and pieces of data that we needed just to fill in some of those gaps. The other question I'll try and answer at least really quickly here, is one from Puria, which is around the features in the future to connect the structures to satellite data and so forth. That would be absolutely awesome if we were able to get to that point. At the moment, we use the long and lat for everything that's in there from a location perspective. But I think if we could get to a point of satellite data and image mapping, that would be great. But I think at the moment we'll focus on the data side of things, and those other bits will come along going forwards. Got one here from Derek, and I'll have a go at this one myself as well. But if you gentlemen have got any thoughts on this as well, then please feel free to chip in. And this is there a step where we could identify who's already working on particular projects that are underway or coming up, so we can collaborate? How can CODA facilitate this moving forwards with the platform and the data available in the public forum? We've got to have a think about whether that would be feasible. There are already other tools out there, such as Project Connect and the ICN data sets, where major projects, when they get announced, would go up on there. What we're really trying to do right now is to give a long-term forecast, so you can see what the future landscape looks like in the decom space. You can look at specific projects and start to strategize yourself in terms of, how would my company best approach this project? Do I go straight to the owners? Do I go to someone else to try and partner and so forth? But that's certainly something we would like to think about, how we could potentially deliver something into the future. But it's there's a lot of opportunities out there, I guess, is sort of where I sit with that. Any thoughts from either of you gentlemen?
Yeah, I guess quick one. Yeah, so it's an interesting question, something we've thought about. It's probably the hardest thing to do as well, because a lot of what comes into the public domain is that forward-looking piece where you're submitting an EP, submitting plans, future plans, but there's very little in the public domain in terms of things that are currently happening. You don't tend to hear about stuff unless something might have gone wrong, and you don't always hear when work has been done. So kind of keeping it updated from that respect that's one of the hardest pieces. So unless you've got a formal mechanism to do that.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that. For us, that's part of what our platform actually does, is to provide benchmarking across different areas, and for operators and service partners to connect. We've always looked at it more as, you say, Cormac, you're working on a project now, so how do you collaborate on the data, the insights, the lessons learned? There, it's really around the people that are working on it. But it really comes down to how much people want to share in that space. There's no technical reason you can't do it.
Another one for the two of you to have a go at. What type of efficiency savings are you seeing or will expect to see through bringing all of this together in one place?
Cormac, I'll let you go first on that one.
Okay. Well, hopefully significant efficiencies from a CODA partner perspective, because like I rattled off a lot of the databases that we went to, and a lot of the documents, which some of them are 2,500 pages, and you may have multiple documents for a given project. So hopefully it saves our partners a significant amount of time in trying to source some of this information, but then also kind of pull it together in a meaningful way. From our perspective, we've done this now once. It's all plugged together. It's connected. So the next time we run it, it's not 8 months. It's Jake's team pushing a button and us ingesting a whole bunch of new information and updating from there. So significant efficiencies in terms of running it again, and hopefully lots of efficiencies for partners.
Yeah, I think I'd echo that. I mean, one of the metrics that we've always looked at is that example of a 2,500 page PDF, and then we can process that in a matter of minutes in terms of getting the data that's out from it. And the efficiency there that we see a lot working with other operators is, well, okay, now that means that an engineer can spend days actually doing their job, not as a data reader or data gatherer. And so yes, there's a timing piece, but then that value add is the other big piece as well. Yeah.
From, I guess, my thoughts on this as well. I mean, one of the reasons we did this, when I think back to the very early days with CODA, it was all the questions we were getting were often from companies just looking to understand what the size and shape looked like and where they could get the data from, and pointing people to a library of 200 environmental plans is, you almost feel like it's cruel and unusual punishment. Whereas now we can say, well, go and look at this, you'll find it, you'll digest it down to a particular thing. You may get all you need from this data set, in which case it saved you all of that time trawling through all the other documentation. Or you may then think, okay, I'll go over and have a read of a particular EP on one particular project or two projects. The efficiency saving to me is very much in that understanding of what the market looks like, working out how you position yourself, where the opportunities sit, where you could go going forwards. And as time goes forwards, we'll start to add more and more features and more efficiency to this, particularly as we get feedback from users. Once people start, we built this based on what we think it will do, on what we think people need from it. But as soon as we start getting feedback from people to say, oh, could we do this, could we do that, that will be additionally helpful for us as well. So I think the days are still young on this, but it's just to have it out there and have people start to use it is so important for us now. I think we may have gone through all the questions in here. Now there was a sort of a duplicate question around details of the major contractors. That's something we can have a think about as time goes forward and so forth. I've got a couple of extra questions, maybe. One for you, Cormac. So what's next? Yeah. And I mean, I know the answer to this because we've already talked about it. But as we go forwards, what are we looking at doing next?
Yep. So I guess in the first instance, we're looking at mapping onshore infrastructure, starting in Western Australia, and that will tie into the data set. And there's significant opportunities around the data that we can connect to the existing Forward Outlook, be it a breakdown of material typology type information. You could also even integrate cost type information. It's really just a lattice work that we've built and strong foundations that we can kind of append items to based on partner feedback and demands.
Yeah.
Version 1, see where we end up in version 2, 3, 4, 5, eh?
Yep.
But yeah, it's certainly going to be an interesting journey going forwards. So look, I'll thank you, gentlemen. Now I'll just maybe do a last little bit of closure just to give people a sense of sort of where we're at and what we've got. So anybody that's on this that is a CODA partner, if you log in now, you go onto our website, the big lozenge button in the top right hand corner. From there you can navigate down to the tile in the partner portal. That will open up the page that Cormac walked you through with all of this. On there, of course, you'll find all the other materials that we've released in the partner space over the years, the best practice database, all the reports, webinars. This webinar eventually will find its way into there in the next few days once it gets edited down as well. If you are not a partner and would like to be, then please do reach out to us. Got to put a little plug in there at the end. And look, the key for us for all of this is to continually learn. As you get into it, if you see errors that you believe, there's a typo, something has misread some data out of one of these reports that we've carried forward and we've not picked up on an error, please do flag them to us. we can turn those around and fix them very, very quickly. If there are things that you think, oh, wouldn't it be great if it only did this one other thing, then also please put those in as well, and we will, as best we're able, with the budgets that we have available to us and the best of technology we have at our fingertips, we will endeavour to incorporate as much of that as we can into future versions as we go. But look, on that note, Cormac and Jake, thank you so much, both for this session, but also for all the work you've done to get this incredibly valuable tool to the point that it's at now. I mean, I could not be more happy with where we are. You know, I've looked around the world, and I genuinely believe this is the best that's out there. I don't think there's anything that comes even close to this in any other jurisdiction. So to have this now available to the Australian market live, and ready to go, you know, up there and running, is just a phenomenal achievement. So thank you both, gentlemen, for all your work to get to here. Audience, thank you very much for dialing in for this one. If you have any follow-up thoughts, please chuck a question on the contact at the CODA website, or send it direct to myself or Cormac or Jake or Pavel, who's sitting over to my left here driving all the tech on this stuff for us to make the webinar work. And look, on that, have a great rest of your day. If you want to share this with your friends, it will come out as a watchable video in about a week or so. And if you've got any questions, you know where we are. So thank you very much, everybody.